beer, it's good for you.
Hello and welcome to the video. Within this guide video I'll be sharing my tried and tested recipe and methods for brewing my American craft lager recipe, which I am aptly calling Stars and Stripes. So let's get to it. I will now take you through the steps in order. Here is a sneak preview to start with of my recipe's vital statistics. This recipe offers an approximation of 5.5% ABV and is certainly offering a good level of flavour. More on this later. This recipe, like all of my shared recipes, is written by me and can be found in full within the video's description, which is underneath the video window when viewed on a desktop computer. Like all of my shared recipes, this recipe is very tried and tested, so brew with confidence. You will also find a link to the recipe in full on Brewfather, which can be used free of charge with some restrictions. To ensure the very best results and so that you're actually brewing the recipe as intended, I strongly suggest that your initial steps will be to convert the recipe before ordering in your ingredients. I have an easy guide to doing this on Brewfather on my channel, and the video guide for this is shown on screen now. Within this video guide, this recipe is being brewed using a Gen 4 Brewzilla 35 litre to the volume of 20 litres or approximately 5.28 US liquid gallons. But as part of the conversion process, this can be scaled and shaped to suit your own brewing system and volume requirements. Recipe conversion is an essential part of the initial process for any shared recipe, but thankfully the conversion is easy when you know how. I also strongly recommend for the best results that you plan your water profile ahead. After all, beer is mostly water and its balance is very important. Shown on screen is the water profile that I preferred in developing this recipe, which is found on Brewfather. Brewfather also has very good documentation on how to use the software to enable you to make the necessary water changes too. Moving on now to the brew, and this begins with the mash. This starts by gradually adding your milled grain into your preheated mash water. Key tips here are that this is not something that you want to rush. Add your grain gradually and stir it carefully in as you go. Doing it this way is much easier to get it right compared to pouring all of the grain in and then stirring. It is also why grain spades like the one I'm using are so popular for homebrewers. Moving on to the actual mash now, and as you can see for this brew I'm not using the top plate, as quite frankly it is not needed or useful for grain bills like this. Let's now take a look at what is involved here. The main fermentable is Pilsner malt at 85% of the grain bill. This is literally our canvas for flavour, and it will allow for a nice crispness to the overall end result. If you were to go for a floor malted variety compared to a regular 2-row Pilsner malt, then this would allow for a difference in flavour, but not every taste palate would notice it within this recipe. At 10% we have Munich malt, which will add in a malty quality along with light background notes of caramel and honey, which help this one sing in flavour and also aroma. Helping this further is 5% of Biscuit Malt, which will provide a warm bready-like flavour backing and aroma. This grain bill is not designed to be super flavourful, of course, in line with the style, but it is designed to have more flavour compared to a regular American lager, of course. It was then time for the sparge, which I recommend you do by hand using a jug. I prefer doing this with the top plate, as you can see. Like with mashing in, this is not something you wish to rush for the best and more predictable of results. During the sparge I set the brewing system to ramp up to the boil, and this is the stage when the boil has been reached. To avoid a boil over, it is very important to give the head a good stir so that all the solids drop down to the bottom of your brewing system. You will need to keep an eye on this throughout the boil and stir further to remove the top protein. Let's now look at the boil schedule. As you can see, I've set this recipe with a modern boil time of 30 minutes and naturally will enjoy the extra flavour that this provides. This is, to be very clear, my main reason to boil for 30 minutes, but there are also bonuses of time and energy saving too. For more information about this, check out my video as shown on screen that runs through all of the details and also how to convert those older recipes with 60-minute and 90-minute boil times. Once the top protein was nice and clear, it was time to start the boil timer. Our very first hop addition here is at 15 minutes, and even if you still wish to boil for longer, then do keep this hop addition and then the one that follows at the same timing. This recipe uses a combination of Centennial and Saaz, which give this beer the familiar European lager taste, along with the classic American flavours of Centennial, which is essentially Cascade on steroids. This gives an overall hop flavour and aroma profile that is citrus along with aromatic pine and floral notes. There is also a fruity combination of both grapefruit and tangerine, which is contrasted by earthy and spicy flavourings in the background. It certainly is a very refreshing, interesting and tasty combination that works really well in a lager. When you are adding these hop additions, be sure to give them a good stir in. This will release the vegetable matter to the bottom of your system with the rest of the trub, and will also ensure that the hop oils are quickly absorbed into your wort. Once the boil was finished, I used my counterflow chiller to cool the wort down to yeast pitching temperatures and transfer started into my fermenter. For this recipe I've used Lallemand Nova Lager yeast throughout much of its development and enjoy the end results that it brings to this recipe. Nova Lager has a wide temperature range compared to other lager yeast, which ranges from 10 to 20 Celsius or 50 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit. For this recipe I go to the top end of this range to obtain the yeast's slightly fruity and tropical flavours, which I really enjoy with this recipe. This yeast is very fast, and at this temperature you can expect it to be done in around 3 days averagely with this recipe. I then suggest that you do some cold crashing if clarity is important to you to help this one settle out. In terms of using pressure fermentation, I would advise against it, because the fermentation is so short anyway, and you will lose the nice background esters of this yeast that really benefit this recipe. If for whatever reason you cannot use Nova Lager yeast for this brew, then I would recommend either Fermentis 3470 or Lallemand Diamond. 3470 offers a little more flavour and aroma, so this would be my suggested pick for this recipe, but perhaps your taste palate would prefer Diamond's more neutral qualities. Either way, this would be a nice beer for sure with any of these three types of yeast, with just some small differences. Once your fermentation has reached the point of having just 5 to 10 gravity points left, I would recommend that you then add in your dry hops. I suggest that you have a maximum contact time of 5 days, but 3 days is actually plenty enough. I have tried all methods of dry hopping, but frankly nothing so far has had as good results, and there is no need to buy a book either. The very most important thing here is to keep things clean and sanitary, so here is a guide to doing that in a way that has never failed me so far in hundreds of brews. In this example I'm going to use a hop sock, but the procedure is similar with other container types. This starts with boiling the bag. I strongly recommend doing this no matter if the bag has been previously used and cleaned, or if it's a brand new one straight out of the packaging. I then add this bag into a clean container and add sanitizer as a further safeguard. This will be the same container that I used to load the hops into. Once the sanitizer has had at least 3 minutes contact time, then this is then removed. After this point I then wash and sanitize my hands, and this is repeated if I need to touch the bag after touching anything that is not clean and sanitary. These are very important steps to avoid contamination, which is all too common when it comes to homebrewers making IPAs because of this step. I then carefully add the dry hops with the bag lining the container, being sure that nothing touches the bag except for the hops. Once you have loaded all of your hops into the bag, then be sure to tie a nice strong knot to keep all of the hops contained. This loosely fitting hop bag, so there is room to expand, can now be added into your fermenter. Let's now look at the end beer from this actual brew along with my tasting notes, starting with a close-up look at the pour and then the same pour with a focus on the full glass. As you can see, the beer is quite a light gold on the pour, but a golden orange in bulk in the glass with a fresh white head that is certainly on the large side. I have made no attempts to clear this beer as I prefer this natural hazy look, but the choice is of course yours, and you will find that this will gradually clear on its own anyway. This beer has been in the keg for 10 days at the point that you see it here, and has been under 12 psi of pressure, which is 0.83 bars for this time, and I'm also using this pressure for serving too. I feel that this one is actually better after 4 to 6 weeks. The flavours separate more and it becomes cleaner. This one is certainly tasting very good already though, so here are my tasting notes, starting with aroma. The aroma found here is very crisp and fresh citrus tropical, along with those grapefruit and tangerine notes that you would expect from Centennial hops. In the background there are some light earthy and spicy notes. The hop flavour side here is also dominated with citrus and tropical notes, and then of course the grapefruit and tangerine. The citrus tropical side does not hit you like an IPA though, it is far more gentle and easy, just as it should be in a lager. The finish here has a little bite to it that is accentuated by the light spice from our Saaz hops. This is contrasted by the grain bill, which gives this beer a very crisp backing with small background notes of malt, bread and caramel. Some of my tasters also detected small elements of honey, but without any real sweetness of course. Here are my notes. This beer's flavour profile makes it very much a lager, but with a hop infusion from Europe and the US that makes this one taste extra special. In my opinion, this makes this lager extra thirst quenching and refreshing. And here is my final impression. This is for certain a craft American lager rather than being an IPL. The various flavours are certainly all there, but in balance, and with harmony between the malt and hops rather than simply screaming hops. This balance makes it an easy drinking beer that can certainly flow for a while due to the more refined ABV. Please do let myself and the community know what you think of this video guide, and also I would love to hear your own tasting notes once you have brewed this one and let it condition for a reasonable time. I do hope that you found this video useful, informative and interesting. If so, why not consider liking and subscribing? For further support you can join the channel's Facebook group, and if you would like to support the channel then check out the channel's merchandise store, as all profits go back into the channel. Until next time, happy brewing!